To News at 1, I am Alicia Jali. President Cyril Ramaphosa has made an amendment to the regulations governing the Commission of Inquiry looking into state capture. He says he has made the amendments in an effort to address concerns about the lawfulness as well as constitutionality of specific sections of those regulations. The regulation, which deals with the admissibility of possible criminal proceedings of evidence presented to the Commission, was of particular concern. The presidency received submissions from the Hellen Suzman Foundation as well as civil rights organization AfriForum that the regulation could undermine efforts to prosecute any persons implicated in criminal activity. Well, we're going to continue with the reactions to the story. We're now very pleased to be joined in studio by Mr. Anton van Dalsen from the Hellen Suzman Foundation. As you know, this is one of the organizations that made submissions on this very same issue. Mr. van Dalsen, thank you so much for joining us. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
All right. Firstly, what is your reaction to the swift amendments to the regulations?
Well, we are glad that these amendments have been changed, and I think in order to realize how important this change is, one needs to realize what the original regulations said. Mm-hmm. And the original regulations effectively made it impossible to use evidence that was given before the Commission and also evidence discovered as a result of that evidence in any later subsequent criminal trial. So that would have made criminal trials arising from testimony given before the Commission practically impossible. Not absolutely, but practically impossible. And the changes, we submitted the reasons for, or the request that these regulations be changed to the presidency. And in terms of the changed regulations now, the only evidence which is not able to be used in a criminal trial would be evidence given by a witness which is self-incriminatory.
Okay.
But any other evidence may be used in potential...
So in layman's terms, Anton, what does that mean? If I'm a witness and testifying, what does this rule actually mean?
That means that if you make a statement which incriminates yourself...
Yes, during the commission, yeah?
Yes, that cannot be used in a subsequent criminal trial against you.
Against me.
But anything else you say can be used, or evidence which is discovered from what you say can be used in criminal trials against other people.
All right. Well, do you think that these changes now have directly addressed all aspects of the regulations? Are you satisfied with them?
We are happy with the changes. And it's a very important issue. And we're surprised that this seemed to go underneath the radar when the regulations came out. People didn't seem to be aware of the implications of this.
Absolutely. But now, Anton, does this mean that it's a done deal that those who can be found guilty during this commission of inquiry are actually going to be prosecuted?
Well, I think the commission would not find people guilty, but the commission would be in a position to recommend that certain steps be taken or to hand certain evidence to the prosecuting authorities, and then it would be over to them to decide whether they want to conduct criminal trials.
You know, Anton, while we're still debating about that, I mean, we've seen a lot of anger in the country when it comes to such commissions of inquiry, where people feel that it's just a talk shop and it leaves it more open-endedness more than it does provide any answers. Are you then, as of course the Hellen Suzman Foundation, looking at making this a unilateral law for any future commissions of inquiry of this nature to have prosecutorial powers?
I think what is very important is to realize or to take into account what the purpose of a specific commission is.
Yes.
In this specific case, commission into state capture, and I think everybody is aware that there was widespread fraudulent and corrupt criminal activity. And in this specific case, to effectively make it impossible for criminal trials to follow the commission, it just makes no sense. But I can imagine there might be commissions of inquiry on other topics where it might be in the interests of getting all the evidence before the inquiry to say, well, give evidence, but we won't prosecute. But that all depends on the subject of the inquiry and what the purpose of it is.
All right. Let's say now that the commission does have, like any prosecutorial powers, how would that system, in your view, work so that it's fair for everybody?
Well, my understanding of how the commission would work is they would hear the evidence. They would in their report make certain recommendations. If they feel that there was criminal activity, they would make recommendations about or recommendations to the prosecuting authorities to take steps, and it would then be over to the prosecuting authorities. It wouldn't be the commission itself that prosecutes people.
But then why isn't it a joint venture then, Anton, between, of course, the commission and the judiciary?
I think the idea is, first of all, to get all the facts on the table, and then to decide which actions are liable to be prosecuted and which are not.
All right, let me take you back to our previous point when we started this interview, Anton. Why do you think there were problems, or why did you have issues about how the original submissions or regulations were actually tabled?
You mean how did they come about, or
as in, like, do you feel that they were done in a certain way to shield certain people from certain things, etc.?
It's impossible to say, but there are really two options. The first option, if one takes a charitable view, would be that there was an incompetent cut and paste job with the regulations taken from other previous commissions where it might have been appropriate to have those limitations on criminal prosecution. If one takes a slightly more suspicious or cynical view, you would assume that this was done intentionally in order to shield certain people from later prosecution. But it's on the facts that we know, it's impossible to say which one of the two it is.
All right, let's talk about your expectations now that there's been amendments made on the regulations going forth. What exactly are you hoping that this commission is going to go out to do?
Well, I think it's a huge job that the Commission has. It's a very important one. And from what we've seen, it has been properly resourced. It has the proper resources to carry out its job. The people have the proper expertise. And there's a large expectation, I think generally, not just from ourselves, but generally in the country, as to the work that the Commission will do. And I think, everyone must support the Commission in its job. And once the report comes out and it's clear what the Commission's findings are, and then that we consider, or that we have a look at that and see whether the Commission's findings are appropriate, are fair, and what action needs to be taken in consequence of those recommendations.
I mean, we saw with the Life Esidimeni, the recommendations that are now before the police stations, the charges that have been brought. But with that in mind, Anton, before I let you go, this, I promise, is the last one. With those amendments in mind and what you've just said that you wish that the Commission achieves, do you think the issue of time is still a big issue? And why wasn't this raised when you were going for the amendments? I mean, 6 months to do all of this in light of the new recommendations or amendments?
Yeah, difficult for me to say. It takes time to get something like this on the road.
Absolutely.
It's not uncomplicated. But things seem to be proceeding. So, on that score, I can't really make a comment as to whether it's too slow or not.
And the time that it's given to work around the issues. All right, Anton, thank you so much for joining us this morning and giving us clarity on that matter. That was Mr. Anton van Dalsen from the Hellen Suzman Foundation, another organization that has joined the fray in having the state capture inquiry conditions relooked.